Tak všichni online?
Já jo.
Taky.
A ty, babi?
Babi, musíš tam na to kliknout. Ne, na to
Babi,
druhý.
musíš tam na tu ikonku.
Sluchátko, babi.
Vypadáváš.
Truly moving documentary that tells the story of the unfair trial and imprisonment of Azimzhan Askarov through the eyes and words of Azimzhan's wife, Khadija Askarova. Askarov was an activist who advocated for the rights of the Uzbek minority in Kyrgyzstan. Last Chance for Justice depicts the final part of Khadija's long and brave fight against the injustice suffered by her husband Azimzhan, who was denied a fair trial and who was imprisoned under very harsh conditions. Against all odds and in very difficult circumstances, Khadija never gives up and appeals to the Supreme Court to seek justice for her husband. Because not only she loved him, but also because she believed the judicial system could review her husband's case and set him free. During today's event, we will have the chance to hear from her in a recorded message she kindly agreed to send us from Kyrgyzstan. And I'm very honored to know that the family is most likely watching this screening. So this is indeed an opportunity to hear her story and her husband's story. So after the screening, we will now debate the situation of minorities and human rights activists in Kyrgyzstan. So it's my pleasure to warmly welcome our panelists. Firstly, Marina Shupac, director of the film and also one of our Sakharov Fellows from the European Parliament, which is a program for human rights activists and defenders. And we have Eamon Gilmore, the European Union's Special Representative for Human Rights. Eamon actually met Azimzhan personally. And we have Tolekan Ismailova, a lawyer speaking directly from Kyrgyzstan. Tolekan defended Azimzhan's case in court. So the screening and debate are a part of the One World Film Festival in Brussels. It is the biggest cinema event specifically dedicated to human rights issues, and it's organized mainly in the Czech Republic by the NGO People in Need, a very efficient and esteemed human rights organization. After last year's postponement due to the pandemic, the festival is back, though fully online. Nevertheless, I'm very happy that we can participate again in the Brussels part and associate the European Parliament to an event that uses such an interesting tool to promote human rights. Our main purpose is to give a voice to those who risk everything for just and fair human rights causes. That is the reason why we award the Sakharov Prize as European Parliament. Together with the laureates and the Sakharov Fellows, we form a strong community. To defend the human rights and tolerance, which we consider the common cause of all mankind, and offer our support to all those who risk everything for a better world based on human dignity. And that was the case of Azimzhan Askarov. So, having seen the documentary, I would like to open the debate with our panelists. And let's firstly turn to Marina Shupac, the director and producer of this documentary. Marina, how did you actually become aware of Azimzhan's and Khadija's story, and what made you to go to Kyrgyzstan and shoot this documentary?
Thank you very much, Heidi, and many thanks to One World for organizing this crucial discussion. I'm happy to greet you from my home country, Moldova. And I want to start answering your question by saying that I'm myself an ethnic and linguistic minority in my home country. And this makes me naturally driven to stories of resilience of ethnic minorities worldwide. And it was at around 2015 when I was taking part at the fellowship program for minorities at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And for the first time, I found out that in 2010, there was an interethnic conflict in Kyrgyzstan. And I became curious, how come I never read about this conflict in the mainstream media? And as a journalist and a filmmaker, I started to make some research. And I realized that during that conflict between the Kyrgyz majority and the Uzbek minority, hundreds of people died. And most of them were from Uzbek minority. I also learned that some of the attacks on Uzbek neighborhoods could amount to crimes against humanity, according to International Commission on Inquiry. And I also learned that while Uzbeks were disproportionately suffered during the conflict, they were also mostly the ones who were charged for organizing this conflict. And I learned that Azimzhan Askarov, a human rights defender, journalist, and artist, is one of them. And because I didn't see much news in the mainstream media about the situation in Kyrgyzstan now, I went to Kyrgyzstan primarily wanting to make a story about aftermath of this conflict. So I went there to see how does the Uzbek community live 10 years after this interethnic violence. But when I arrived to Kyrgyzstan, I realized that the Uzbek community mostly live in fear. And a lot of people were afraid to talk to me, even without a camera. And very quickly, I realized that Azimzhan Askarov and his wife Khadija are probably the only Uzbeks who are willing to talk to me and share their story with the world. So that's how I decided to focus this film on this story.
Thanks a lot, Marina. Let's turn to Eamon, our special human rights representative of the European Union. I was very excited to learn, Eamon, that you have met with Azimzhan Askarov. Can you recall that experience so that we can share it?
Thank you very much, Heidi, and thank you for the privilege and honor of speaking at this event today about Azimzhan Askarov and, of course, Khadija. And again, I offer my sympathies to her. And of course, I also congratulate Marina Shupac on the making of this important documentary, which unfortunately I've not been able to see due to some technical reasons at the beginning of this program, but I will see it. I had the privilege of and honor of meeting Azimzhan Askarov. It was in December of 2014. I had recently left office as the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of my country, Ireland. And I was asked by frontline defenders to take an interest in a number of human rights defenders who had been unjustly imprisoned. And one of those was the case of Azimzhan. So I traveled to Bishkek. I met there with the OSCE office, with civil society representatives, with representatives indeed of the Kyrgyz government and parliament at the time. And I visited Azimzhan in prison. And we had a long discussion. He told me of the events which led to his arrest, of the treatment following his arrest, of the unfair nature of his trial, of his innocence, of his determination to get justice and to vindicate his name. And I also met on that occasion, following my visit to the prison with Khadija, and I know from my discussion with her of her suffering and that of her family. Now, throughout my working life, I have met with many people seeking justice in many different circumstances and in several countries. And I can say few, if indeed any, have made such an impression on me as did Azimzhan Askarov on that cold winter's day in late 2014. I remember very clearly the clarity, the conviction, and the convincing way that he protested his innocence, and the way in which he described the injustice of his situation and of his treatment. I recall also the passion with which he spoke of the abuses of human rights that he was documenting at the time of his arrest. And I recall in particular his personal strength and the dignity despite his suffering. And these are, I think, the personal qualities which I recalled with great sadness when I heard of his death last year. And they are memories which certainly will stay with me, I think, forever. And they will continue to motivate me in the work that I do on behalf of the European Union to help to secure justice for him.
Thanks a lot, Eamon. It's really very important that people go and visit prisoners who are for no reason imprisoned and convicted. And in your position as a former foreign minister and then future EU special representative, we very much value as European Parliament that you do all this important work. But do you think that the EU has done enough for human rights in Kyrgyzstan and other Central Asian countries?
Well, in this particular case, the European Union has been following this case since 2010 and has closely followed the case against Azimzhan and regularly raised it in all political dialogues with the Kyrgyz authorities, calling on them to implement the UN Human Rights Committee's opinion to release him, to quash his conviction, and thus to fully comply with its international human rights obligations. As you know, the UN Human Rights Committee found in March of 2016 that Azimzhan had been arbitrarily detained, that he had been held in inhumane conditions, that he'd been tortured and mistreated and prevented from adequately preparing for his trial, and that therefore his human rights had been violated. Also, ODIHR, the OSCE, had also noted serious violations of fair trial standards in his case, and also had reported of visible signs of torture. Over the past 10 years, the different special representatives for Central Asia have indeed tried to visit Azimzhan in prison and have raised his cases on several occasions in bilateral discussions. Last spring, in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, we again appealed to the Kyrgyz authorities, and we noted with great concern at that time the worsening situation regarding his health. In a statement on the 13th of May last year, the EU specifically referred to his advanced age, his poor health condition that had exposed him to greater risk. We had information coming from his lawyer that his health was in serious danger. And again, we appealed to the Kyrgyz authorities to ensure that he got all of the necessary medical attention and that he was released on medical and humanitarian grounds. Since his tragic death on the 25th of July last year, the EU has been reiterating in all political dialogues, including the Cooperation Council, the Cooperation Committee, the Human Rights Dialogue, high-level bilateral meetings with the Kyrgyz authorities, calling for an independent, transparent investigation in order to deliver justice. At last year's EU-Kyrgyzstan Human Rights Dialogue, the Kyrgyz side informed us that an investigation would be completed by the end of 2020. A reply is still pending to that, and indeed even today the European Union will be again raising this issue at the EU-Kyrgyzstan Cooperation Council. We've also expressed concern over the Kyrgyz Supreme Court's decision not to recognize Kadisha's right to be his legal successor, which of course has a lot of implications. So as far as our work is concerned, we're going to continue to pursue the case for justice for Azimzhan Askarov. And of course, we are also going to continue our engagement with Kyrgyzstan about human rights generally, but particularly about the issues relating to national minorities, which was, of course, at the base of where this case originated.
Thank you, Eamon. So this shows us that the case for our side is not closed, that we are still calling for an independent international investigation into the case. Now, it's my great pleasure to turn to Tolekan Ismailova, who is a lawyer who actually defended Azimzhan Askarov in the court. And we could hear from you about your experience of defending Azimzhan in court. How did the situation evolve in Kyrgyzstan after Azimzhan's case regarding individual human rights activists and minorities' rights? So we're very grateful to have you here and to hear from you.
Thank you so much, dear Mrs. Heidi, dear all. I think it's a very important discussion, and thank you so much for your great attention from Europe to Kyrgyzstan to Central Asia, because we need to understand human rights, it's universal, and respect human dignity, it's key issue for all European diplomats or citizens in the world. And I want to say thanks to One World Festival. We are partners from 2007. And regarding your questions, this June 15th, it will be 11 years since the Askarov died, detained, tortured, and denied access to fair justice from June 2010. And all these years, different lawyers, include lawyer Memorial Kirill Koroteyev, who came from Moscow and was with us, was with Azimzhan and Heidi, and we unite our efforts, Solidarity Network from a civil society organization, civic platform, and the OC, and Azimzhan have different lawyers. This Nurbek Tokuna from first time until today, and Vahitov and Salih from Osh. I was public defender for Azimzhan and for Khadija. And unfortunately, if the early barriers were related to bureaucracy and political corruption, the new risk as a pandemic have removed the last hope for justice. And Askarov died on 25 July 2020 in prison 47 without access to alternative health care. It's a really tragedy. A review of several court decisions and the human rights defender statements of allegation has revealed to the world the overt discrimination against the human rights defenders and his family members and human rights defenders in the Kyrgyz Republic. Marina's documentary tells how Askarov's family, from the early days of his illegal detention, fought together with us for the rule of law and transparency of decision at all levels of government, from the local court, procuracy, and the investigative authority to the global level. To this day, Bir Duino and the Solidarity Network continue to demand the implementation of the UN Human Rights Committee views on prisoner of conscience, Azimzhan Askarov. Khadija, Azimzhan's wife, has been on the front line all these years, seeing prison from the inside, herself talking to prison officers and trying to change the situation for the better by demanding prisons reform with us. Khadija took part in all court at all levels, enduring all the humiliation, discrimination, and harassment. Khadija has been advocating with us from the community in Bazar Kurgan to the global level, and has been a voice for human rights defenders, especially Askarov, in prison at the OC and the UN platforms. Today, we are demanding an independent examination on the cause of the deaths of the Askarov in prison. We are against the classification of the investigator in prison authority by the investigation team under the state penitentiary system. This is a conflict of interest because he died in prison and investigation stay inside prison, and this same Soviet time, you know, it's terrible situation. As a result of the investigation by this XIN, its prisons reform, it will soon be years and they are conducting the investigation in a closed regime and under the cover of state and military secrets. For today, for example, they invite me and say you should sign it secrets. I said I'm not agree because, and we continue to demand that the new authority of the Kyrgyz Republic, especially President Japarov, we sent our special letter yesterday, implement the views of the UN Committee of Human Rights in the Kyrgyz Republic, and Askarov's case recognize the human rights defender posthumously as innocent, provide compensation to Askarov family, and hold the perpetrators of the human rights defenders case accountable. This move by the new Kyrgyz authority will provide a new approach to combating human rights violation in Kyrgyzstan and will provide an enabling environment for human rights defenders' work against impunity and for victims of torture to believe in justice, because a lot of victims of torture waiting from June 2010 for today, justice and fair judge system in Kyrgyzstan. The refusal of the prison system authority to allow alternative access by ambulance doctors to the sick human rights defenders in July 2020 is criminal and selected because former officials can have access to treatment in state and private hospital outside prison. Only Askarov was closed. For 11 years, we have fought for prisons reform, humanization and acceptability of deaths of prisoners in closed institutions in Kyrgyzstan in the format of adapting the Mandela principle, but people keep dying. These are facts of extrajudicial execution. All these years of fighting for access to fair justice through 47 different levels of court have shown systemic overt discrimination and judicial dependence on a group of politicians involved in the tragic event of June 2010. We have lived in a climate of impunity for political corruption since 2010. Therefore, attempt to narrow the political space for NGOs in Kyrgyzstan remain dilemmatic and threaten the work of independent media and human rights defenders as religious fundamentalism and conservatism grow. The influence of Shanghai Cooperation, one hand, in another hand, Eurasian Union on the Russia, other hand, on the decision-making process in Kyrgyzstan is evident. Anti-constitutional draft laws against the mass media and open attempt to take state control over independent NGOs and the mass media have been initiated. It's important to adapt the EU guidelines on the protection of human rights defenders and the UN resolution on business and human rights to improve the environmental and return to the value of human rights and freedoms in our country. It's important, dear Mrs. Heidi and dear Mr. Gilmore, thank you. I remember your visit and thank you so much. And for today's memory, it's important to support the initiative to develop horizontal leadership in the 7 regions and to start advocating from the local to the global through the EU-funded View for the Frontline project methodology, which is currently working in 50 countries, including the Kyrgyz Republic. And Mrs. Heidi, I know you are successfully support for Green Line or Green Land alternatives. And I think Kyrgyzstan needs your attention and your experience. And regarding Askarov, we are waiting justice because Askarov's case opened for other victims hope and happiness, especially for minority groups. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tolekan. Sometimes I think that this is a very unjust word indeed, because only about 1 billion people live in countries ruled by rule of law. So there's so much to do, and we will discuss this still during this discussion. But now it's my great honor to direct our attention to a statement that Heidi Askarova has given to this special event. So let's listen to Heidi for a few minutes.
Assalomu alaykum, hurmatli Yevropa parlament a'zolari. Men 2010-yilgi iyun hujjati sabab bir umr qamoq jazosi hukm etilib va 2020-yilning 25-iyulida vafot etgan Azimzhan Askarovning turmush o'rtog'i Askarov Hadija bo'laman. Asosan iyun fojiasidan turmush o'rtog'im Azimzhan va ko'plagan o'zbeklar jabr tortishgan. Azimzhanning aybi o'zbekligi, haqiqat uchun kurashib, sud, militsiya kuch organlariga yomon ko'rilganligi va oddiy jabrlangan xalqqa yordam berganligi. Azimzhan o'zi o'lgani yo'q, uni o'ldirishdi. 2016-yilgi O'nNing Azimzhan tezlikda ozod bo'lishi haqida chiqarilgan buyrug'ini ham Qirg'iziston Respublikasi buni bajargani yo'q. 9-iyul 2020-yil Azimzhan sog'lig'i yomonlashib, tana harorati ko'tarilib, vrach ko'rigiga chiqish uchun boshliq 19-boshliq turmaning boshlig'i Tursunbek nomiga yozilgan arizasi bo'yicha ham vaqtida uni vrach ko'rigiga olib chiqishmagan. So'ngra kameradoshlar temir eshiklarning bir necha bor taraqlatishi natijasida vrach ko'rigiga olib chiqishgan. Azimzhan o'zi o'lgani yo'q, uni o'ldirishdi. Kasalligi kundan kun avj olib, o'zini yomon his qila boshlagan. 16-iyul kuni ombudsman xodimlaridan 2 kishi ko'rib, Azimzhanning sog'lig'ini ko'rib, qaysi ahvoldaligini ham ko'rib bilishib chiqishgan. Va yana 2020-yilning 20-iyulida Gizing xodimi press sekretari Samat Xolikovni ham ozodlikka bergan intervyusida Azimzhanning sog'lig'i joyida, u hech qanaqa kasal emas, uni kasal deb tarqatish uning tarafdorlariga kerak bo'lib qolgan degan ma'lumot ham bor. Nima sababdan ombudsman xodimlari va Gizing press sekretari Azimzhanning sog'lig'ini yomonligini ko'ra bila turib bunday gapni aytishlariga haqlari bor. Agar Azimzhanga vaqtida meditsina tarafdan yordam berilganda, u hozir tiriklar orasida bo'lishi mumkin edi. Ularning maqsadi Azimzhanni yo'q qilish bo'lgan. Ular bu rejalarni amalga oshirishdi. Shu kungacha iyun fojiasi bo'yicha hech qanday ish ochilgani yo'q. Mana qanchadan qancha uylar kuydi, qanchadan qancha odamlar otib o'ldirildi, qanchadan qancha uylarda kimlardir o'g'irlab ketishdi. Ularni kimlar qildi? Bu ishlar qachon ochilib, haqiqat qachon ro'yobga chiqadi? Qanchadan qancha yosh, hali uylanmagan yosh yigitlar, o'zbek millatiga mansub yosh insonlar gunoh qilmay gunohkor bo'lib turmalarda o'tirishibdi. Ular ham bir kun ozod bo'lamiz-da, biz nima gunoh qilibmiz degan umid niyatlar bilan o'tirishibdi. So'zimni oxirida sizlardan turmush o'rtog'im Azimzhanning nomini oqlashda va o'tirgan kunlarga kompensatsiya to'lab berishda, Azimzhanning xotirasini tiklash uchun uni nomiga tasviriy san'at maktabi ochishda yordam berishlaringizni, yana Men baxtliman degan kitobini to'liq holda chop etilishda yordam berishlaringizni so'ramaman. E'tiborlaringiz uchun rahmat.
So, thank you very much, Hadija, for this message. And in case you are with us in this screening, we all want to send you our condolences because of what happened to your husband in a totally unjust way. I want to recall that the title of the book that Azimzhan wrote is I Am Happy. And there was this request that we could look for possibilities to translate and publish that book also in English. This reminds me a little bit of the last speech that Liu Xiaobo, the Nobel Peace Prize winner of 2010, made in the court. That was titled, "I Have No Enemies." So these great personalities who have been defending human rights, they managed to live through these terrible sufferings without bitterness. It is ununderstandable. By the way, today is again an anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre from 1989, and I think we can recall that every 4th of June. And Liu Xiaobo was one of those who went against the rulers in that. So we will continue our discussion on Askarov and the consequences, and on the situation of human rights in Kyrgyzstan and in Central Asia. So now I would like to very much to ask all of you to give some ideas on, let's start from the judiciary, the judicial system. What would be the key questions in a judiciary reform? And particularly to Eamon, I would like to ask if there's anything more that the EU and its member states could do here. I know that, for instance, Finland has been supporting legal aid for rural women who have no access to justice in situation of gender-based violence or unjust situations in their marriages, etc. And Tolekan, do you think that there is any willingness with the new leadership of Kyrgyzstan to go for a judiciary reform? You talked very well about the need for the prison reform. So shall we start with Eamon?
Thank you, Heidi. Well, yes, indeed. I think there is more that we can do in this area. First of all, the fairly recently adopted EU Central Asia strategy puts the promotion and protection of the rule of law, human rights and fundamental freedoms very much at the center of our relationship with the Central Asian countries. That must remain at the heart of all of these relations, including in the case of Kyrgyzstan. So I think that we can do some more work in this area. I had been discussing with Peter Burian before the COVID outbreak the possibility that he and I might travel together to the Central Asian countries and have a look on the ground at what is required. As you know, Peter's term is coming to an end soon, so I would hope to be able to organize a visit like that with the new special representative for Central Asia, and to look at maybe some of the areas in which we can provide some practical support. And clearly, I think that will be in the areas of judicial reform, of prison reform, of rule of law generally. And clearly, as part of that process, to talk with civil society, and perhaps indeed also to have an opportunity to talk with Tolekan, indeed in person, about what we can do in practice.
Thanks a lot, Eamon. Tolekan, so what do you think? What could be done? And is there a political willingness?
Dear Mrs. Heidi, dear all, thank you for these key questions, because without independent judge system, it means country don't have real development and respect human dignity. And if I come back to June 2010, and for today, we passed 47 judge system in different level until the Supreme Court, and it was torture. It was torture. It was not judge. It was real torture for all of us, especially for Askarov and his family. And when we look today, they started together with the European Union what kind of reform. And of course, our dream when a judge should not depend from who appointed them. Because, as you know, Kyrgyzstan is clan-based, has clan-based politics, and sometimes it's not judge. People depend from one or second politician or some relatives, you know. And that's why it's very important when we look at this annual report from a UN system, UNDP, you will find Kyrgyzstan 122 places. It means education very bad, not quality education. Second, high quantity of maternal deaths and children deaths. And third, it's people not access food security, you know. It means when we go to judge, it means we don't have access justice. We depend from different clan-based politics. And when we talk about book of Askarov, I'm happy. He is really happy because when we met with them and say, you know, some officials from White House sent you letter, and they said, if you sign it, excuse me, pardonne me, it means you will be free. And several times, Askarov smiled and took us, and how I will sign this letter? It's Stalin regime. We need reform. I want to go to independent judge system because it's not about me. It's about millions and millions of people and vulnerable groups, especially Kyrgyzstan, because Kyrgyzstan includes about 100 ethnic minority, you know. That's why we need to start talk about judicial justice or a legal system. What kind of judge appointed? It means judge depend from parliament or judge depend from president. And this new constitution gave us a lot of dilemma, you know, very well. And now our government talk with European Union include Mr. Burian, and I hope our recommendation will include it for this platform, because if they continue talk about a judicial system should depend from include a national value or patriarchal stigmas from men, president or speakers, it will be very bad for us. That's why during 30 years, especially from 2010, we need, real justice, because impunity growing and a lot of political corruption and radical patriarchal system occupied us now. That's why it's very important, because we have very nice civil society and we have very nice new lawyers also, and they gave a lot of writing and through TV, through radio, a lot of recommendation, which included key recommendation from European Union. And this time talk about this Kyrgyz authority GSP Plus, because it's good for economical growing, and talk about Kumtor case, because we need based for business and human rights. And this time to create new positive steps to justice. And I hope, because without optimism, it will be very bad. I hope it will be better. And finally, Askarov will be Askarov family will see justice and a good decision from authority, I hope.
Thank you very much, Hadija. I wanted to ask you about the institution of public defenders in Kyrgyzstan, but also in the 4 other Central Asian countries. Is this institution free, or does it depend on country to country? I have had a pleasure to meet with all the 5 in Helsinki, Finland, when I was Minister for International Development. And there was a great hope that these 5 public defenders could support each other, to give peer support and to help to build democracy and rule of law. So what is the state of this institution at the moment?
Mrs. Heidi, we need more attention, more consultation, more expertise from European Union, from your side, because last years include this new risk and disasters, include pandemic, give us a lot of new barriers. And on one hand, it's a new draft of the law, which same in Russia, foreign agent or state-controlled NGO movement and include independent human rights defenders. And on the other hand, we need your attention for our security, for our family security, because when we defend LGBT or national minority leaders, say Askarov, we became foreign agent, we are not patriot, you know. And when we go to street or when we go to relatives, we lose a lot of relatives. And we also want to say we are happy because people should be independent and follow those real human dignity and human rights and liberty. But clan-based politics, and as you know, the Soviet system also continues this life because we don't have, same in Finland or same in Georgia or Armenia, democratic leaders, because nomenclatura come back because we don't have this water supply last system, old system and new system. And that's why we are happy, you are right, because we have new leadership and also great new lawyers. And I hope they will give influence for decision-making process better. And young human rights defenders, women rights defenders need real support from frontline, from civil rights defenders, from Human Rights Watch, and we need to create a real horizontal, a platform to continue our work.
Thank you very much, Tolekan. Marina, you went to Kyrgyzstan and you went to the court and you saw all these, you saw the law enforcement and you got to know the history of the case of Azimzhan Askarov. So were you shocked about what you saw? And what would be your observation about how you think that we should support Kyrgyzstan on the way towards democracy and rule of law?
Thank you very much for this, Heidi. Indeed, I was shocked by what I saw, but I also was shocked by what I heard, because unfortunately I've heard many stories which I couldn't depict in this documentary for many reasons, including by security reasons of people concerned. So I guess the key highlight would be I realized that Azimzhan's case is dramatic and important, but unfortunately it is not unique. And I was shocked to learn that there are more than 40 other Uzbek prisoners who were imprisoned for life after 2010 events. Who are they? What happens to them? Who defends them? We don't know these questions, and I can only imagine the situation of their families. And I also learned that we are talking about here about an adult generation, a generation of Azimzhan, but I also learned that this impunity and also this tension which stays in Kyrgyzstan after 2010 also influences the young generation. For instance, I learned that after 2010 violence, Uzbek minority women in Kyrgyzstan have fewer opportunities because the number of Uzbek minority women who attend schools and universities significantly decreased because the Uzbek community became much more protective. For instance, I also learned that young people, especially from the minorities, have fewer opportunities to realize their potential. There is a huge underrepresentation of minorities, and in particular Uzbek minorities, in public institutions. So I could continue the list, but I guess the main conclusion which I draw from myself is that Azimzhan's case should be also seen in the context of the human rights situations of of ethnic minorities in Kyrgyzstan, and in particular in the context of Uzbek minorities in Kyrgyzstan. And I was also shocked that there is almost no representation of international organizations in the southern part of this country which would monitor the situation. So I think it is really important for international community to find a way to continue engage with the minorities in Kyrgyzstan, especially Uzbek minority, because at the beginning of our discussion, I said that Azimzhan and Khadija were probably the only Uzbeks who agreed to talk to me on camera. So Azimzhan was somehow a voice for entire community. So now, after his death, the whole community became almost voiceless. So it's important, of course, to support human rights in Kyrgyzstan, but it's probably important also to support those the most vulnerable, and here I mean ethnic minorities and the Uzbek community.
Thanks, Marina. Eamon, there is a question to you from our audience. It's directly related to what Marina just said, that there are scores of wrongfully convicted Uzbeks who end up behind bars following the 2010 inter-ethnic conflict. The person who asked this question says that their cases should be immediately reopened and reinvestigated with the assistance of international or UN experts. So, Eamon, do you plan to bring this issue up with the current Kyrgyzstani authorities?
Well, I think there are a number of issues. I think, first of all, there is the whole issue of national minorities and the priority that needs to be given to that in our engagement with Kyrgyzstan. I mean, I've seen some figures, for example, that while minorities represent, I think, 30% of the population of the country, are represented at only about 9% level in the civil service, and these are issues, obviously, that has to be addressed. In respect of those who are in prison, yes, this is something that we can certainly look at. This is a good moment, actually, in which to do this, because, as you know, Heidi, we recently adopted a new action plan for human rights and democracy across the world. And that was adopted by all of the 27 member states last November. That is now being given practical implementation. And one of the ways it's being given practical implementation is that the European Union delegation in each country, including Kyrgyzstan, together with the embassies of our member states, are working on what we call specific country strategies. And this obviously is something that can be addressed in that context. And yes, this is something that we can pursue with the Kyrgyz authorities, and I will certainly have a look at it. I would be interested, for example, to get more specific information if that's available, either from the questioner or from anybody else who has raised it during the course of this discussion.
Thanks, Eamon. I'm sure that you will get this information, and thank you for being open to this question. I also want to mention what Tolekan said. There is this trade system called GSP+, which means that the trade partners to the European Union that commit themselves to implementation of 27 international human rights agreements will get access to EU market with the products without customs and tariffs. And in fact, Uzbekistan is just joining this system, which has been already available for Kyrgyzstan since 2016. And since we know that in the neighboring Uzbekistan, there has been quite a positive turn with the new president. So I wonder if there's a perspective for closer cooperation in this kind of issues, like, for instance, the civil society in both countries could really demand and encourage the implementation of these 27 international human rights agreements. And I'm very closely linked with this work in the European Parliament, so I'm extremely interested to continue to work you on this, because sometimes indeed we see that trade can be a great help in human rights work, and we should harness the whole potential of trade in the service of human rights. So, Tolekan, is this something that you could think of, or what is your view?
I think these alternatives to continue new partnership with Central Asia countries include Kyrgyzstan, because as you know, after Soviet Union, we have 92 uranium places. For example, Mailusu included to 10 dangerous city in the world from Soviet Union, imagine. And in another hand, we have a terrible situation with Tajikistan border, as you know. And this came from Soviet system, same in cognized territory or gray zones, same in different countries. And sometimes we have terrible situation because this, our, past stories continue for today and give a lot of barriers. In the second hand, we have very bad business structure from China, which crushed our nature, which crushed our river, and as you know, Tajikistan lose some territory and give for external debts, you know, and that's way, this time to give attention together with Europarlament, together with high-level diplomats, include civil society, especially women, vulnerable groups, talk Marina about minority, and together discuss a new opportunity, a new bridge, because through economical way, we will resolve a lot of conflicts, border conflicts, and it will be help to citizen connection. And I hope you talk about Uzbekistan leadership, and I hope new leadership in Kyrgyzstan, which has a lot of difficult situation with national budget, with international debt, will be more positive and give, political will for these new ideas. And I hope together with the Europarlament, we will adapt these 27, very best, documents, and it will help to human rights and help to vulnerable groups more positive success for the sustainable development, because in another hand, we have these sustainable development goals, and Kyrgyzstan gave first report last year. It was very successful, include some climate change and give attention to prevention and give attention to women participation and minority participation for decision-making process.
Thank you so much, Tolekan. I can see that we have plenty to discuss. Hopefully in a forthcoming discussion we can have, but I think we can be happy that we have this event in the One World Film Festival. So it's my pleasure to thank Marina for a great documentary. Please see it again. It gives new layers to the story of Azimzhan Askarov when you see it, and it shows how important the contribution of Hadija to human rights continues to be, and we have to honor his memory in different ways. So, and thank you very much, Eamon, for all the good work you do, and hope to see you soon. And Tolekan, indeed.
Thank you.
A great discussion with you as well. So,
thank you.
This screening and debate is now finished. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for all of you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.